Tonight on Primetime, Israel claims it has killed one of Iran's most senior security officials, Ali Larijani, but Tehran has yet to confirm his death, instead releasing a handwritten letter attributed to him, raising serious doubts. If verified, the killing would mark another major blow to Iran's leadership, following reports of high-level losses in recent strikes. So what is the truth, and what does it mean for this widening conflict? A very good evening. Israel says a top Iranian security official has been killed, but Iran has not confirmed the claim. Iranian media has released a handwritten letter attributed to Ali Larijani, adding uncertainty to the reports.
Israel's defense minister Israel Katz said on Tuesday that senior Iranian official Ali Larijani had been killed in an Israeli strike, citing information from the military.
I have just been updated by the Chief of Staff that the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, Larijani, and the head of the Basij, Iran's central repression apparatus, Soleimani, who is responsible for the massacre of the protesters, were eliminated last night and have joined the head of the annihilation program, Khamenei, along with all those eliminated from the axis of evil in the depths of hell.
There has been no official confirmation from Iran. State media in Iran released a handwritten condolence letter attributed to Ali Larijani, addressed to fallen naval soldiers, adding uncertainty to reports about his death. If confirmed, Larijani would be among the most senior Iranian figures killed since the reported death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei during Israeli-U.S. airstrikes that began on February 28th. Larijani, born in 1958, previously led Iran's state broadcasting organization for a decade before becoming a close advisor to Khamenei. In 2005, he was appointed Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, a key body responsible for shaping the country's nuclear and security policies. During his tenure, Iran faced growing international pressure over its nuclear program. Following a resolution by the International Atomic Energy Agency in 2005, Tehran warned it could resume uranium enrichment and limit inspections. The United States has long accused Iran of seeking nuclear weapons, while Iran maintains its program is for civilian energy purposes.
Well, staying on the Middle East, the outcome of Israel's overnight strikes targeting senior Iranian figures remains unclear. Meanwhile, in Israel, fresh missile alerts, casualties from falling debris and ongoing operations in Lebanon are underscoring the widening scope of the conflict. Maria Rodriguez Abaldi has more now from Jerusalem.
Here in Israel, the people celebrate the death of Ali Larijani, Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, and after Khamenei's death, perhaps the regime's most important leader was one of the targets of last night's Israeli attack in Iran. Both the Prime Minister in a speech and the Minister of Defense take it for granted. The outcome of the attack is still unclear, but if the news is confirmed, it's clear that Israeli intelligence is very well positioned. And also, IDF confirms Chief and Deputy Chief of Basij militia eliminated along with top command in the overnight attack. Israel advances major deal with Greece worth tens of millions of euros for 4 Israeli defense systems, most focused on air defense. Local media say the program approval progresses as Greece potentially prepares for Turkey's confrontation and response to Iranian launches toward Cyprus. Warning alerts activate across central and north Israel from incoming missile launch detection all day long. Several people were injured when fragments struck different buildings. Meanwhile, Israel continues its offensive in southern Lebanon, where more divisions have joined. Israeli civilians threw stones today as soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces operated in the area near Kiryat Arba. As a result, one soldier was slightly injured and received medical treatment at the scene. The tension is palpable after 19 days of war, and society is divided between those who question to what extent these conflicts are worth it and those who trust their armed forces.
Well, to help us unpack what this could mean for the conflict, I'm joined now by Anna Evans, political analyst, who's joining us from Lisbon. Anna, always great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight on Prime Time.
Thank you for having me.
No ambiguity as far as Israel is concerned. They say he's dead, they've killed him. How credible are these claims, do you think?
Well, they are very credible, one should assume, because Israel, as a tendency, only claims major decapitations of leaders when the government of Israel is already sure and certain that it has happened. So it would be very unusual to have Israel's government at the top level making such an announcement without having first confirmed it has in reality happened. So it looks like it is highly probable that the killing has actually taken place, and so one very important decapitation of the regime in Iran.
And what do you make of this handwritten letter that the Iranians have released? I mean, it's an interesting strategy, isn't it? Because if he is dead, then of course at some point that will come out and be confirmed. And I guess releasing the letter now perhaps potentially could end up losing them credibility at a later point.
Well, it is a strategy to buy time. You know, a letter in itself is a bit meaningless because the letter is undated. It can have been written some time ago. People really don't know. You know, the letter refers to events that have taken place 10 days ago or more. So obviously it does to any event of the past 24 hours. And so one can always speculate, but in truth, it is a strategy for a political and internal domestic peace. So for the regime, it is not nice, as we can imagine, to have to admit that not only the supreme leader has been decapitated, but now the head of the National Security Council has also been decapitated. And therefore, you know, these are very heavy losses and very important ones. So, you know, bringing a letter out is a modus operandi for, you know, getting time for postponing the inevitability of a very bad news at the domestic level. And we must, you know, take into account that the level of information that circulates at the domestic level might not be the same level of information that we hear outside. And therefore, these are ways of fixing, political fixing, communication strategy to gain time before the high authorities of the regime really have a plan B and, you know, decide what to do next. So by the time the death is confirmed, there must be already a very clear path ahead, you know, and without any margins for allowing public contestation to, you know, to spring up.
Anna, in terms of that path ahead, as you described it, if this is confirmed, perhaps when it is confirmed, how significant is Larijani's death going to be for Iran's decision-making machinery? Well,
Larijani had a very peculiar role. in sense that he had a rare prerogative of articulating between different pillars of the regime. And so he had obviously full access to the supreme leader. He was commanding the operations, the military operations in defending the country from the conflict, you know, the Israeli and US attacks. He is a former IRGC commander. He was responsible for crushing, one of the responsible leaders for crushing the recent dissent, popular dissent that happened in January in Iran, and which killed thousands of Iranians. He had already been responsible for a previous crushing of dissent, you know, a few years ago. He actually is the sort of person who would be able to articulate with different spheres of power. Furthermore, Larijani comes from a family where other members of the family also control important aspects of the society's power. And so this is a really very, very major decapitation in political terms with a great impact. So we have one of the crucial, vital families that are entrenched in the judicial areas of the system, in the security apparatus. We have, you know, a family which is so important, and, you know, subsequent to Khamenei's death, we have this elimination of someone who was vital to the whole security apparatus and to the war apparatus. So he articulated between internal security and external defense. And that's how important he was in the system.
Anna, in terms of the pace, the cadence of these attacks, are we seeing an escalation in these targeted strikes against the top Iranian officials, do you think? And also, do you think there's a sense in which Israel and the US are trying to split the IRCG from the sort of more conventional army, almost sow seeds of dissent between the two groups?
I mean, that would be ideal from the point of view of the US and Israel, because the big issue about how to dismantle the Ayatollah regime, the Islamic Republic, the big issue is that we know how extensive and pervasive the influence of the IRCG, the revolutionary course, is within the Iranian society. So the IRCG controls economic spheres, internal security. It controls also some infrastructures that are critical for the military apparatus, and it has its own information system. And this pervasiveness within the political apparatus and the society has meant that these guards, whose mission is to defend the Islamic regime, the radical regime, have held great leverage over society. You know, even entering university in Iran has a special quota if people belong to the IRCG. You know, the critical oil, construction, telecommunication sectors are controlled by the Revolutionary Corps. The special and critical positions in government, both at the regional, local, and central levels, are also controlled by former IRCG commanders. So, and it has played a role in crushing dissent of the population. And so ideally, these kinds of decapitations of leadership aim at trying to dismantle, you know, the force of the Revolutionary Guards in the same way that Israel tried to dismantle the organization and leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it is the same principle that after infrastructures are hit And we know that a lot of naval and air force and air defense capacities of Iran are dismantled at this point. And we know also that the nuclear infrastructures have been hit. And so a lot of the infrastructures in themselves have been, eliminated or at least very much damaged in terms of operational capacity. But then we have the human resources. So next to infrastructures, then, the attacks are focusing on the human side, the leadership. And so the hope of the US and Israel is that by eliminating key vital leadership positions in different pillars of the leadership network within Iran, the infrastructural decapitation will be matched by human resource decapitation. So basically the strategy is to fragment leadership and to prevent coordination so as to retard, any reconstruction of external military apparatus. And ideally to promote like a field, a free field for internal dissent to thrive. But that, I would say, is really the great challenge that the US cannot tame.
Yes, indeed. Finally, Anna, this uncertainty that we have at the moment hanging over Laranjani, who does this type of uncertainty help the most? Which side benefits most from it?
Well, at this stage, it looks very clear that the Iranian apparatus, the political regime, is trying to gain time, because, after eliminating the supreme leader, now an elimination of the head of the National Security Council, and the information that the son of the supreme leader, so the new supreme leader, is also physically injured, and having decapitated also the leadership of the internal repression apparatus, the regime really needs to find out how best to cope with the next stage, both in terms of the war and the coordination of external security and defense, but also in internal political legitimacy. This is a problem, it's too much. The regime will start, seeming vulnerable in political terms. And so at this point, the uncertainty allows time, and time is of essence when a regime is crumbling, at least in terms of its high office. So time will allow Iran, to pull itself together in political terms, in terms of the government apparatus, and find what the best trajectory and the best next steps will be. And so certainly Iran is the one, to gain with this uncertainty.
Anna, it's always great to get your analysis. We appreciate it very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
US President Donald Trump says American strikes carried out with Israeli support have hit more than 7,000 commercial and military targets across Iran. Trump claimed the campaign has reduced Iranian ballistic missile launches.
At this table, our powerful military campaign to end the threats posed by the Iranian regime continued in full force over the past few days. They have been literally obliterated. The Air Force is gone. The Navy is gone. Many ships have been sunk. They're warfighting ships, but I guess they didn't know how to use them. And anti-aircraft is decimated. Their radar is gone, and their leaders are gone. Other than that, they're doing quite well. They've been a terror for 47 years, And now, I guess, the world, through the United States, with the help of Israel, is doing what should have been done many years ago. Should have been done many years ago. Since the beginning of the conflict, we've struck more than 7,000 targets across Iran, and these have been mostly commercial and military targets. We've achieved a 90% reduction in their ballistic missile launches and a 95% reduction in drone attacks. The missiles are trickling in now at very low levels because they don't have too many missiles left.
Well, the US president also expressed frustration with countries declining to send warships to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He said he was unhappy with the response from the UK, who turned down the request. This comes, of course, as the conflict in the Middle East enters its third week.
As the conflict in the Middle East enters its 17th day, US President Donald Trump has signalled frustration over the reluctance of allies to support US military efforts, particularly in securing the Strait of Hormuz. Trump earlier called on nations to help safeguard the strait after Iran responded to US-Israeli attacks by using drones, missiles and mines, effectively closing the channel to tankers that normally transport a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer refrained from sending warships to the strait, with authorities saying they were considering only the option of deploying drones to search for mines.
Prime Minister of UK, United Kingdom, yesterday told me, I'm meeting with my team to make a determination. I said, you don't need to meet it with the team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make your own. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us or to send some boats?
Meanwhile, strikes across the Middle East have continued, with Iraqi security officials reporting drones and rockets attacking the US embassy in Baghdad in what they describe as the most intense assault since the attacks began. Baghdad's Al Rashid Hotel was also struck on Monday, causing damage but no casualties, though no group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Across Israel, interception explosions were seen in the night sky over Tel Aviv. It comes as the Israeli military says it is advancing operations against Iran, with reports of strikes on Iran's Navy headquarters.
Our pilots attack across Iran all of the time. In the 24 hours, we hit the Revolutionary Guard's Navy headquarters. The Iranian regime used this headquarters to turn the naval arena into a terror arena. In another attack in the heart of Tehran, we hit and destroyed a satellites attack capabilities development center, a center that posed a threat to Israel's and the whole world's space assets and satellites. At the same time, we continue to attack the Basij forces, the Iranian oppression forces.
As the conflict in the Middle East continues, prospects for de-escalation appear limited, with neither the US and Israeli side nor the Iranian side signaling a push towards a ceasefire agreement.
Well, I'm joined now by our very own Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, very good indeed to have you with us in the studio. Everybody's talking about the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, aren't they? How significant is this, though, for global energy markets?
Well, Guy, indeed, that's a very good question. And all experts all around the world are now questioned on how we will proceed if there is no any changes in the Strait of Hormuz. This is today, if I'm not mistaken, it's 18 days of the war, and we can see the consequences already not only in the Middle East, touching three countries, Iran, Israel, and the United States, which is far away from the Middle East, but also affected due to the oil price changes. Oil prices indeed increased daily in the countries which is relying on the oil and LNG supply, and even the fuel prices in the United States of America also been affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So 20% of global oil consumption and about 1/5 of global LNG trade normally pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and you can imagine how significant this narrow strait, but still it plays a very important role for the countries in the region, for the countries in the European Union, in Central Asia and in Asia. that's why it's not surprised that Donald Trump tried to play this card, calling the countries like China, Japan, the South Korea to join the operation, to send the chips, to help the United States to deal with this problem. But as we can see for today, no any country actually willing to join this war, understanding the global consequences it may have for the region and for the world itself. So oil prices already increased over $100 per barrel. It's a huge price for many countries, and the countries like the members of the European Union already started to use the oil available in their reserves, as they are lack of the oil supply in these days after the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So if there is no any changes, they can be the oil crisis in the global market from the global perspectives. And also it's important to understand that the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf region itself, it's not only the key oil producer region and they play a very important role for the export of oil in the global market, but also from the point of view of the export, the fertilizers. Yes, that's why many experts are saying, and even the United Nations are now so much concerned that if there is a lack of the fertilizers in the global market, meaning that the cost of production will be increased. And in the next year, probably most of the countries will also feel the huge price for the cost of the production and the products itself, or maybe in some countries the products will not be available in the amount which is available at the moment. So this is the second point of view, and the third point, which is also being mentioned by many experts and even the policymakers in the world, that the Strait of Hormuz is important for the transportation of the semiconductors from Taiwan, let's say. So the global ship supply chain under the threat, meaning it can also affect the production in many countries. So maybe for today it's not so much significant. We cannot see the global consequences at the moment, but after some months and even in the upcoming years, it will be visible. Therefore, there is this narrow strait. I will repeat myself, it's a very narrow place, but it has a global significance for the region itself, for the Iran itself, because Iran also using this strait to export oil for the bordering countries and to the China, let's say. But the countries like China already rely on some other diversified sources or the reserves it has for the moment. But other countries who are indeed in a big dependence on this transportation, it will be notable in the upcoming months even more.
And Anastasia, this hesitancy, this refusal by the UK, what does that point to in terms of disagreements between Western allies?
I will see that this is the first time when we can see such kind of disagreement in between of the NATO member countries, particularly in between of the United States and the closer allies like United Kingdom, France and Germany. We can see that during the term of Biden administration, they had more or less common approach to the situation between Russia and Ukraine. But since the time Donald Trump came to power, the second term of his presidency, we could see the real disagreements, first in a case with Denmark and Greenland, and now with the situation around Iran. The countries in Europe, of course, since the beginning, probably had a more or less common position with the United States, but they try to abstain from the direct involvement in this confrontation, in the conflict, taking more a defensive position. Like the United Kingdom or France, they were ready to involve only in case of there is a direct threat to their territory, to their interest in the region. But as for now, they also understand that the direct involvement will have a significant consequences. And as it was mentioned also by the government spokesperson of Germany, it's not a NATO war. The conflict, the war itself is not going on the NATO territory. There is why there is no need for the NATO member states to be directly involved. And we can see a significant division in between of the United States and United Kingdom within these days. Donald Trump even mentioned calling Keir Starmer that he is not a Churchill. He is indeed very much dissatisfied by the position of London, mentioning that for many years it was United States who provided support and security guarantees for many countries, including Europe. But now Washington didn't expect such a, let's say, position of abstain of many countries in the European
He got
Union.
very personal as well, didn't he? At one point, he was
Absolutely.
he was saying, you know, why do you need your team to make a decision? It was clearly he was very angry.
Yes, and the United Kingdom also tried to somehow be a part of this process, but from the perspective of the peaceful negotiations. Even France or the countries like Germany and even the United Kingdom itself again are trying to mediate and trying to call for the immediate ceasefire and the peaceful negotiations to start between Iran and the United States. But as it was officially stated in London, ending the conflict is the best and surest way to get the strait reopened, meaning that London is not willing to send any ship or any, let's say, military help, military assistance to the United States, particularly in that region. But I guess we can also understand the position of these countries and the position of Donald Trump itself, as Donald Trump willing to see all partners, all the countries, specifically the countries like United Kingdom and France, very close allies in within of NATO. It happened, remember, during the Iraqi war or the war in Afghanistan, when the NATO Article 5 point actually was used for the first time. United States received a significant support from the alliance. But this is the first time in the history when the countries in Europe and close partners for Washington are not willing to be deeply involved in this confrontation, in the conflict. So we can understand the position of those who are not willing to send the people to die in this war on the territory which is far away from NATO, despite the fact that Afghanistan and Iraq was also far away from that. So probably in the beginning there were some heart of unification in between of the countries, but now understanding all of the consequences, the countries trying to use more diplomacy, as I guess no one expected Iran will use so many attacks against the neighboring countries. So no one expected this. And now, seeing all of these consequences, the countries are willing to have more or less stable negotiations to proceed further.
And let's turn to Tehran now. Whether or not the Larijani assassination is confirmed, what do you sense is the strategy from Iran at this point? Are they, I mean, there's always going to be a difference between the rhetoric and the reality behind the scenes, but do you get a sense that they're keen to escalate or perhaps to look for opportunities to negotiate?
Well, I guess Iran now using all tools it has on its ground. There is a clear deterrence component, as in Iran there is a clear understanding in case of the start of the on-the-ground military operation, it will not be able to defeat its position. And it will have a serious consequences for the civilians, for the population in Iran, having long-term consequences. That's why probably it relies on asymmetric tools like the missiles and drones to be used against the countries in the region. And it was actually, we have to understand and highlight it once again, there is no one clear position in Tehran at the moment. When the security guard is mentioning that there is a potential targets in all of the countries where there is a military base of the United States, military asset, or if the territory of any country is being used against Iran, then it becomes a potential goal for the military operation and the military response from the side of Tehran, meaning that there is no clear understanding on how this conflict may escalate in the future. Iran sends tens and hundreds of missiles and drones to the neighboring countries, affecting the countries like Qatar, like the United Arab Emirates, and also threatening other countries also who is willing to assist the United States. And having this position at the same time, there is also, they're trying to threaten the countries, saying that if there is a willingness to not to be targeted by Tehran, then the countries who want to have a peaceful, let's say, coexistence, they have to remove the Israeli embassy from their territory or stop any diplomatic relations with Israel. It's not very diplomatic sentence, but still. So there is a one message coming from the president of the Iran, who actually, by the way, had a recent conversation with the United Nations Secretary General, negotiating the possible de-escalation. But as we understood from the statement which was spread in social media, Iran is considering the end of this war only in case of let's say, assurance from the side of the United States that there will not be any simple war in the future. And Iran is officially stating that it's ready to open the Strait of Hormuz only after the full end of the war. So it cannot happen without the end of the war. So it's deterrence component, which has already mentioned. The second, there is a calibrated escalation when Iran has launched missile and drone strikes and disrupted the shipping in the Gulf. And the third and perhaps most important element is a leverage for negotiations. So it's still open to have a dialogue with the countries, but putting its own conditions and threatening the countries that in case of the states not willing to proceed with the conditions Iran put in the beginning, since the beginning of the process, then the consequences may have indeed a long-term implications for the countries in the region and for the global world from the perspective of global economy and oil prices.
Anastasia, always great to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Israel expands operations into southern Lebanon, launching what it calls limited ground incursions against Hezbollah. Do stay with us. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Israel's military says its troops have begun limited and targeted ground operations against the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Now, several Western countries have warned that a wider offensive could worsen the humanitarian crisis and prolong the conflict. Here's more.
Canada, France, Germany, Italy and Britain have warned that a major Israeli ground offensive in Lebanon must be averted, saying it could have devastating humanitarian consequences and risk a protracted conflict. The statement also expressed support for Lebanese efforts to disarm Hezbollah and called for urgent engagement between Israeli and Lebanese representatives to negotiate a sustainable political solution. The move came after the Israeli military said on Monday that its troops had begun limited ground operations against Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon in recent days, aimed at strengthening forward defences. Meanwhile, smoke rose over southern Beirut on Tuesday as Israeli strikes hit multiple areas, with flashes of explosions lighting up the night sky. A statement from the Israeli military said the troops had located and dismantled a Hezbollah weapons cache. The area was reportedly evacuated and weapons and materials used for incitement were seized. Tensions have also spilled across the border. Emergency services in northern Israel reported 3 people injured when a projectile fired from Lebanon struck a building, sparking a fire. Lebanon was drawn deeper into the Middle East conflict on March 2nd after the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel, claiming retaliation for the killing of Iran's supreme leader at the start of the US-Israel war with Iran. Lebanese authorities report more than 880 people have been killed, over 1 million displaced, and more than 130,000 now living in collective shelters. Israel has maintained positions in southern Lebanon since a ceasefire with Hezbollah in November 2024. But the latest escalation has raised fears the conflict could spiral into a wider regional war.
Okay, let's bring in our next guest now, Tom Gross, political analyst from Tel Aviv, who's been closely following developments on the ground. Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Always good to have you on A News. How limited are these Israeli strikes in reality?
Well, they're limited in the sense that Israel is not declaring war on Lebanon. They're limited in response to Hezbollah, which are Iranian operated and financed group. It's really, Hezbollah are not really a Lebanese group. They are like a subsidiary of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And they're limited in the sense that the aim of Israel is to prevent rocket fire at civilians in Israel. And contrary to what your correspondent said in the report right before I came on, there hasn't just been one rocket, there have been hundreds of Hezbollah missiles. The fact that the death toll and injury toll in Israel is relatively small is because of the fantastic investment Israel has done in missile defense and bomb shelters and so on. But no country is going to want to put up with day after day, night after night, huge missiles being rained down on their population center. So it's relatively limited, but I think we need to remember that that there have already been two attempts to stop this, and this doesn't just start now. There was a UN resolution 1701 that should have removed all Hezbollah missiles. The Lebanese government and the UN should have removed Hezbollah missiles. And then there was a second agreement following the October 7, 2023 attack from Hamas. The day after October 8, Hezbollah started firing rockets in solidarity with Hamas, at least firing rockets at northern Israel. And the Lebanese government gave a commitment to the Biden administration, and it later gave a second commitment to the Trump administration to disarm Hezbollah. And they have not done so. And there are thousands of Hezbollah fighters and rockets being rained down on civilians. And that is why Israel has now sent troops into southern Lebanon, because if no one else is going to stop these rockets, Israeli troops will have to stop them.
Tom, why haven't they done so? Is it purely because it's just so difficult for them? It's a difficult country to govern. They perhaps haven't got the capability, or is it about intent and will? And also, could we describe this now, do you think, as open war between Israel and Hezbollah?
Well, firstly, yes, there is open war between Israel and Hezbollah, definitely. As far as the Lebanese state and government are concerned, one problem is that, Hezbollah are a Shia organization. Lebanon is a very sectarian country with Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, Greek Orthodox Christians, Maronite Christians, Druze, and various other groups. And the Shia, who have a higher birth rate, and now the biggest single group. They're not a majority, but they're the biggest single group in Lebanon, and there are many Shia in the army, in the Lebanese army. So one reason is the Lebanese government may be worried that units within the Lebanese army will not obey the orders to disarm Hezbollah. That's one reason. Another reason is that Hezbollah has been very, very well financed by the Islamic regime in Iran, and in many senses they are more powerful and better armed than the Lebanese army itself. But what Israel says, and quite frankly what the Europeans who say they're the allies of Israel and of Lebanon should be saying to the Lebanese government, is it is not a tenable position where you are the government, you have an army, and you cannot allow a separate militia army to exist within your state, and then when that militia fires missiles at civilians in a neighboring country, you say, well, not our fault. It's an untenable situation, and the Lebanese government should be trying to disarm Hezbollah. They have committed to doing so. They greatly angered Trump because they sent him maps. They were meant to disarm Hezbollah by January 1st this year, 2026. They sent Trump maps claiming that they moved Hezbollah out of various villages that are near the Israeli border. And it turned out they misled Trump, which is one reason why Trump also is furious with the Lebanese state. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, just a bit more on that, because it's very interesting. What is the attitude of Israel at the moment to the European approach, some of the sort of warnings, the hesitancy that we've seen around Israel's fight with Hezbollah?
Well, there is, anger with the Europeans. Kallas, the EU, I can't remember exact position, but the person who now speaks on behalf of the EU, I heard somebody referred to as clueless Kallas today. And, it's all very well for them to say, oh, give peace a chance. Everybody wants to give peace a chance. No one wants war. War is ugly. War is horrible for Israelis, for Lebanese, for everybody else in the Middle East. But sometimes you need to stand up to an aggressor, and Hezbollah are an aggressor. I mean, Hezbollah means in Arabic Hezbollah, Party of Allah. They are an Islamic jihadi group that, quite frankly, the Europeans should be backing Israel in their battle against this Islamic jihadi group. And to be honest, most Lebanese, at least the non-Shia, are quietly supporting Israel, just like most Sunni Arab countries are, both with its war against the Islamic regime in Iran and against Hezbollah, because Lebanon will never be free, while Hezbollah is essentially holding the Lebanese state hostage. Lebanon, as you probably know, was kind of originally a kind of Christian Arab state, or predominantly Christian Arab state, and slowly, it has been taken over by Iran and by Hezbollah. So to give Lebanon a chance of moving ahead and for Beirut to once more be the so-called Paris of the Middle East and so on, Hezbollah have to stop being a Iranian-controlled militia inside their country. And I don't know who else is going to do this other than Israel. So they may not say so very publicly, both the European leaders, like President Macron in France or Prime Minister Starmer in Britain, and nor may some of the Lebanese leaders say this publicly, but quietly they are frightened of Iran. That's why they won't say it publicly. They're frightened of the Iranian regime and of jihadis, but quietly they want Hezbollah to be disarmed as much as anybody else. Hezbollah are not only a threat to Israel, Hezbollah are, a threat to the Lebanese state.
Tom, always great to get your analysis. We thank you very much indeed for joining us on
You're
Prime
welcome.
Time.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the latest business news of the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away. Welcome back to Prime Time. Now, Katie Wilson is here with the very latest business news stories. Katie, what's on your agenda tonight?
Yes, so obviously we'll have the latest fallout from the Middle East crisis, but we'll also be taking a look at the latest boom in AI spending, and we'll also have a special report from Nigeria. Let's get started. We begin tonight with the latest from the Middle East, as Dubai Airport gradually resumes flights after an Iranian drone attack forced a temporary shutdown. The incident highlights the growing disruption to regional aviation, with flights cancelled, rerouted and airspace restricted, as the US-Israel war with Iran continues to drive instability across the Gulf.
Dubai's international airport was gradually resuming flights on Monday after a fuel tank fire caused by a drone attack forced a temporary suspension. The US-Israel war against Iran has thrown global aviation into turmoil. Flights have been cancelled, rescheduled and rerouted, as most Middle East airspace stays shut over fears of missile and drone attacks. With the Gulf a global crossroads for aviation, the disruption has sent fuel charges and ticket prices surging, hitting flows of goods such as critical medicines. Monday's incident was caused by a fuel tank blaze, but no injuries were reported. It's the third attack on Dubai Airport since Iran launched assaults on Gulf nations on February the 28th. While the UAE and other Gulf countries host US military facilities, Iran has used missiles and drones to target civilian facilities such as airports, hotels and ports. Flights in the region are about half their usual level, though their number has risen since the start of the war.
Staying with the Middle East crisis, its impact is still rippling through global markets. Wall Street closed higher while oil prices eased after signals that the vital Strait of Hormuz could remain open. Investors are watching closely for signs of de-escalation, even as uncertainty over the conflict continues to drive volatility.
Wall Street's main indexes ended higher on Monday, with the Dow gaining more than 0.8%, the S&P 500 adding 1%, and the Nasdaq climbing nearly 1.25%. Oil prices dropped modestly after the U.S. said it would be fine with some Iranian, Indian, and Chinese ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz, offering investors some relief. Ross Mayfield is investment strategist at Baird Private Wealth Management.
I think the market is pretty desperate for signs of de-escalation, and we've gotten enough hints from the administration that they recognize the move in oil prices, the move in gasoline prices, the move higher in yields is untenable, that it would not be a good thing for this administration to have happen in a midterm election year. And so we're getting the drip of information that they want a de-escalation, that we're moving towards reopening the Strait of Hormuz, Whether that's true or not, the market really wants that news.
Among individual movers, AI-related stocks flex some muscle, with Meta gaining more than 2%. The move higher came after Reuters reported that the Facebook parent plans to shrink its workforce by at least 20% to offset costly AI infrastructure bets and prepare for greater efficiency brought about by AI-assisted workers. Shares of NVIDIA ended higher after CEO Jensen Huang unveiled a new central processor at the chipmaker's annual developer conference. And shares of Micron Technology jumped more than 3.5% after the memory chip maker announced plans for a second manufacturing facility in Taiwan. Outside of tech, travel stocks Delta Airlines and Norwegian Cruise Line rose 3.5% and 5% respectively, lifted by lower oil prices. And shares of Dollar Tree rose more than 6% after the discount retailer signaled it could benefit from favorable tariffs in the near term. Investors now turn their attention to the Federal Reserve's two-day policy meeting, which concludes Wednesday, at which the central bank is expected to leave interest rates unchanged.
Well, let's hear more on Meta shares, which jumped after reports it may cut 20% or more of its workforce to fund heavy investment in artificial intelligence. The potential layoffs would mark its largest restructuring in years as the company ramps up spending on data centers and AI infrastructure.
Meta Platforms shares rose 3% in Monday morning trade. That was following a Reuters report that the social media giant plans to lay off 20% or more of its workforce to offset heavy spending on AI and bet on productivity gains from the technology. If Meta settles on the 20% figure, the cuts will be the biggest since a late 2022 and early 2023 restructuring. That eliminated around 21,000 employees. After falling behind in the AI race, Meta has spent heavily in recent years to catch up by building data centers. It expects a capital outlay of up to $135 billion this year, roughly double of last year's spending. It's meant to secure the cloud capacity needed to train and run AI models. Meta's workforce totaled 79,000 at the end of December. On Friday, in response to Reuters' requests for comment, it said, quote, "This is speculative reporting about theoretical approaches." AI-linked layoffs have been rising globally. Companies have announced more than 61,000 job cuts tied to AI, including Amazon and Australia's WiseTech, since November.
While staying with the AI boom, NVIDIA says the market for its artificial intelligence chips could reach at least $1 trillion by 2027. The chipmaker is now shifting focus from training AI models to running them in real time as demand surges from companies adopting AI at scale.
Computing demand will be much higher than that.
NVIDIA has raised its outlook for AI chip sales, saying the revenue opportunity could hit at least $1 trillion through 2027. That is a big jump. $500 billion it foresaw earlier for its Blackwell and Rubin chips through 2026.
I want to thank Samsung, who manufactures the Grok LP30 chip for us.
At the GTC Developer Conference in San Jose, California, CEO Jensen Huang unveiled a new CPU and an AI system built on Grok. That's a chip startup from which NVIDIA licensed technology for $17 billion in December. Speaking to a huge crowd, Huang said AI was entering a new phase.
Finally, AI is able to do productive work, and therefore, the inflection point of inference has arrived. AI now has to think. In order to think, it has to inference. AI now has to do. In order to do, it has to inference. AI has to read. In order to do so, it has to inference. It has to reason. It has to inference. Every part of AI, every time it has to think, it has to reason, it has to do.
For years, NVIDIA GPUs have led in training AI models. Now the focus is shifting to inference, with companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta serving millions of users. This creates huge new demand for CPUs, which are dominated by Intel and rival the graphics processors made by NVIDIA. Former Intel chief Pat Gelsinger was watching events in San Jose and liked what Huang had to say.
he had a lot to show off. Now we need him to deliver. The industry is built on these capabilities, and lots of competitors coming, but this is important. We need NVIDIA to deliver. The industry is built around them. This is just fabulous.
NVIDIA is also targeting autonomous AI agents with Nemo Claw. That adds privacy and safety to the viral OpenClaw platform, which autonomously handles many tasks with minimal oversight.
Now, workers at JBS took to the streets of Colorado on Monday, launching a rare strike at the country's largest meatpacking plant. The union says this is the first US meatpacking strike in 4 decades, as employees push for higher wages and safer working conditions amid rising beef prices.
JBS employees took to the streets of Colorado on Monday for the start of a 2-week strike to picket against the world's largest meat company. It was a rare labour stoppage at a US meatpacking plant and a sign of upheaval in the beef industry. The union represents about 3,800 employees at the facility. It said it was the first time US meatpacking workers had gone on strike in 4 decades. Workers have faced off with the company over wage increases they say fall short of inflation and over charges for safety equipment. JBS has said it made a fair offer. The dispute reduces US beef production capacity at a time when consumers face record prices and as Donald Trump has struggled to make good on a pledge to cool costs. Prices soared after a years-long drought burned up grazing lands and drove ranchers to slash their herds to the lowest level in 75 years. JBS's ability to process beef was unclear, since the union said it represents all production workers.
And finally, we're rounding off today's bulletin with a special report from Nigeria. In Plateau State, families are digging deep mining shafts in their own gardens, risking their lives for tin as poverty pushes ordinary households into this dangerous, unregulated industry.
Yopshut Jang's yard is peppered with holes plunging around 70 feet into the earth. Mining in central Nigeria has typically taken place far away from communities, but across Plateau State, families are sinking shafts closer to home. It's a risky endeavor driven by poverty and the minerals lying beneath their feet.
When they are under the ground, sometimes accident can happen with them. The well will fall on them. But every day we are praying to God, let God save them.
Jang's 4 sons and other miners working without safety equipment descend beneath the ground in search of tin and columbite. What the sons dig up is sold to pay for school fees and fertilizer. They make roughly between $20 and $35 a week after sharing proceeds with the other miners. Yang says the mining means that as a family, they are just managing. She adds that in a country with widespread insecurity, it's work that keeps young people from making desperate choices.
You see, as our youth, they don't want to, but we advise them, see, it's better for you to come and do this work. Instead of you to go and thief, to go and becoming a kidnap, to come to something terrorist like this, we don't want.
Jang's household was among the first here in Jos to mine at home. But now she finds herself surrounded by neighbours doing the same. One Plateau State lawmaker said residential mining has accelerated, and a survey identified more than 1,000 tin processing sheds inside residential compounds in 2025. That exposes families to toxic dust and chemical residue, in addition to the risks underground. In the past 2 years, around 20 people have died in mining collapses in Jos. But in a country with widespread poverty and where artisanal and small-scale mines account for an estimated 70% of Nigeria's mining activity, many residents say the danger is outweighed by the need to survive.
That's your business news roundup for the day. Back to you, Guy.
Powerful, sobering piece there from Nigeria. Katie, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, deadly overnight strikes across Ukraine with power outages reported in multiple regions. Is this a new phase, perhaps, in the campaign against Ukraine's critical systems? Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met Britain's King Charles III and Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London as the UK steps up support for Kyiv. Well, Zelensky held talks with the King and Prime Minister Starmer, plus NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, focusing on strengthening defence cooperation. The sides agreed on a new military-industrial partnership to boost drone production and expand the use of AI on the battlefield. Now, the initiative combines Ukraine's combat experience with Britain's manufacturing capacity. The visit also includes an audience as London reaffirms its backing for Ukraine. Well, at least 11 people were killed and 55 injured nationwide as Russia launched 178 drones overnight. Most of them were intercepted. Strikes on energy infrastructure caused temporary power outages in several regions, and deadly attacks were also reported. Now, civilians were among the casualties. Officials say Russia continues to target both frontline areas and civilian infrastructure across the country. Okay, let's bring in Maria Ulyanovska now, a Ukrainian journalist. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Maria, very good indeed to see you. Thank you very much for joining us on Primetime tonight. What's your sense then? What does the scale of these drone attacks tell us about Russia's current strategy, do you think?
Russia's current strategy has not changed. It's been like this for 4 years of full-scale invasion now, and we know that these drones were produced by Iran. Now they are manufactured in Russia, and Russia launches these drones every day on Ukrainian civilians. It's not military targets. It's literally just peaceful cities and towns. And we've seen recently part of the drone fell in the downtown Kyiv, in the Independence Square, literally the city center, the heart of Kyiv. So the strategy hasn't changed. It's to create chaos, create horror on the civilian population, because Russia cannot get more military targets and military gains in the battlefields. And we see that Iran is doing the same, sort of the same strategy, trying to do sort of the same strategy in the Middle East with the help of Russia, which Iran has called its friend and advisor in this war against Israel and the United States now.
Maria, how effective are Ukraine air defences in handling these sort of large-scale assaults?
So we know that this is one of the key problems for Ukraine right now. It's the lack of air defenses, the lack of air defense missiles, because the major ally who provided this for Ukraine was the United States. And within the last year, the capabilities of the United States to provide all this help has decreased significantly. And Ukraine has stated again and again that the lack of air defense is what's causing this Russian attacks on civilian population being more successful. And we know that Ukraine has developed new systems, drone interceptors, to fight the drones, but there are missiles that Russia also sends that are harder to intercept, and Ukraine needs Patriot missiles to do that, and there is a shortage of them. And especially after the war in the Middle East, where the United States have used so much of its own air defense capacities, it will definitely influence Ukraine's situation in the battlefield and the battleground too.
Maria, what's in President Zelensky's mind, do you think, as he gets to grips with this latest visit in the UK? I mean, visiting Keir Starmer is one thing, but anytime you involve King Charles, it becomes necessarily more symbolic, attracts more attention. How important do you think this continued support between the UK and Ukraine is, both politically and militarily?
It is very significant. UK is one of the key Ukraine allies. It's part of the coalition of the willing. UK has been one of the strongest partners of Ukraine that has proven that it's going to stand by Ukraine as long as it takes. The phrase that we have been hearing for 4 years from different countries, but not all of them have been delivering this lately. But it is also a symbolic gesture because right now, because of the war happening in the Middle East, the countries have kind of waking up a little bit, understanding that they are not ready for the modern warfare, the drone warfare, and Ukraine has the capabilities to intercept Iranian drones, and Ukraine has been receiving a lot of asks from different countries to come and help with both drone interceptors and people who know how to operate those. And Ukraine has already made contracts with at least 4 of the countries in the region to do that. And so UK, as one of the key partners of Ukraine, in this visit of Volodymyr Zelensky, they've announced a new major drone deal where the UK will invest in the drone capabilities in Ukraine. Moreover, Britain will also give £50,000 to fund an AI center of excellence in Kyiv and provide long-term defense support to Ukraine. Again, we are talking about the necessity for air defense capacities that has been discussed. And moreover, as Keir Starmer said before the visit of Volodymyr Zelensky, this visit is also to stress that Ukraine cannot be forgotten because of what's happening in Iran, and Putin cannot be the one who benefits from this war because of the lifted sanctions on oil and the oil prices going up, and Russia getting more and more money to fund this war. So this is a symbolic visit as to show that the allies of Ukraine remember about Ukraine, care for Ukraine, and are ready to do something, but also to connect those defense capabilities that Ukraine has with the finances that the UK can provide in this case.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you said there, Maria. Do you think this could almost be a key moment in the coordination between Ukraine, UK, and NATO? Because part of the reason I ask that is that Keir Starmer's between a rock and a hard place with the Middle East crisis. He's received a very humiliating, very public telling off from Donald Trump. It feels like European leaders are kind of stalling for time, not knowing which way to go next on the Middle East conflict. Could it be a real opportunity for the UK and for Starmer politically to really accelerate the support for Ukraine and get all the attention back onto that conflict?
It's hard to predict whether this will be as helpful as is stated in your question, but it is definitely a very striking moment, both for the war in Middle East and the war, Russian war in Ukraine, because we also know that the Europeans want to be present at the table when this war will be solved. They want to be a part of the discussions of the peaceful negotiations between Ukraine, Russia, that are mediated by the United States. And we know that recently France has been told off by the Russian foreign minister in a very unpolite terms that they will not have any presence and any say in this table of negotiations because Russia doesn't care for Europe to participate in that. So Europe is now in a very finicky place between the pressure from the United States to enter the war in the Middle East on the fuller scale, as Donald Trump wants the European countries to participate and help unblock the territories there. But at the same time, Europe is trying to pull focus back on what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening with Russia, because Russia is also a key player in the war that is happening in the Middle East. Russia is helping Iran to target its military goals. It's helping with training of the troops. It's helping with the military equipment. So it's all interconnected. It's not just two very separate conflicts. It's two wars that are intertwined, and Europe is trying to navigate a very narrow strait right now.
Maria, very interesting indeed to get your analysis. Thank you for joining us on Primetime.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, a key diplomatic meeting in question. US President Donald Trump signals a delay to his planned visit to China as tensions in the Middle East and the war with Iran take priority. Do stay with us. A warm welcome back to Primetime wherever you're watching. Preliminary agreements were reached during the latest China-US trade talks in Paris. Now, both sides also voiced concerns over unilateral trade measures and pledged to continue discussions to stabilize economic ties.
China and the United States concluded their 6th round of economic and trade talks in Paris on Monday, focusing on tariffs, investment and broader bilateral trade cooperation ahead of President Donald Trump's planned visit to Beijing at the end of March. Chinese Vice Commerce Minister Li Chenggang described the discussions as in-depth, candid and constructive.
Through this consultation, the two sides have already achieved some preliminary consensus on several topics and will continue to engage in consultations going forward.
Li also criticized recent US Section 301 trade investigations, saying China expressed serious concern and warned they could undermine the hard-won stability in China-US economic and trade relations. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the meetings very good and constructive, highlighting that the talks demonstrated stability in the bilateral relationship. He added that any postponement of Trump's visit would be due to the ongoing Iran war, not China's commitments.
Okay, let's bring this story right up to date now. Trump on Tuesday said he and Chinese President Xi Jinping are resetting their meeting that was planned from March the 31st to April the 2nd, and that it will instead take place in around 5 or 6 weeks. Well, our correspondent Manor Makdoum has more from Beijing.
US President Donald Trump said that Washington has asked China to postpone his planned summit in Beijing with President Xi Jinping by about a month, citing the ongoing war with Iran and his need to stay in Washington to oversee military operations. The visit, initially set for late March to early April, is now uncertain. US officials have offered differing explanations for the possible delay. On Sunday, Trump told the Financial Times he might push back the meeting if China did not help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. However, on Monday, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that any delay would be due to the need to coordinate war efforts, not because of requests for China to police the strait or because of trade tensions. Despite the uncertainty, analysts said that both sides remained focused on maintaining stable relations and preparing for a successful visit. They noted that for China's export-driven economy, managing growing global economic uncertainty is the top priority. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian struck a similar tone on Monday when responding to Trump's remarks, emphasizing that head of state diplomacy is vital for guiding US-China relations and confirming that both sides are still in communication about the visit. Manor Makdoum, A-News, Beijing.
Okay, let's bring in now our very own Andy Mioch for more on this. Andy, interesting this. Seem to be some mixed signals going on. What do you think the real reasons are behind this potential delay of the visit?
Well, let's just start with this latest piece of news, Guy. Like you've said, Trump said that his meeting with Xi Jinping will take place in about 5 or 6 weeks. We heard that just in the past hour or so as he was hosting the Irish Prime Minister in the White House, and it was one of those chit-chats with the press, like those trademarked Trump chit-chats where he spoke on many things. He was saying he's disappointed in NATO, he's disappointed in the UK, no one is helping him to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. But we got that tidbit of information. Let's just back it up. The first time the US president floated this idea of this long-awaited summit is to be postponed was on Sunday. In an interview with the Financial Times, he appeared to suggest that he needs to check with China if China will help the US unblock the Strait of Hormuz, and then he'll see whether he'll go at that scheduled time or it can be delayed. Some saw that as kind of a push for China to get involved here, which might be very awkward for Beijing, as Iran is its strategic partner. Now, not long after that, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who was in Paris for trade talks with the Chinese delegation, appeared to soften this entire narrative, saying that the only reason for the possible postponement of the summit would be purely logistical reasons. Then we heard from Donald Trump again a day later, so yesterday. He is saying that the U.S. side has requested a delay and a postponement of his meetings for a month or so because of the Iran war. He essentially said he needs to be in the United States and be available to oversee the war effort in the Middle East. We then heard from Beijing, what Mahnur mentioned, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian, saying on Tuesday that the two sides are talking on the timing and other details of Trump's China visit. He made it a point to reject any connection between a delay and the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, and he said that China has noted that the United States have also rejected this narrative that was spun up in the media.
Has this sort of thing happened before? I mean, how unusual is a delay like this?
Well, not so unusual. If we take a look at Donald Trump, back in his first term, one of those topics that was very hot recently, Greenland, the Arctic island, back in 2019, when Trump launched his first bid to try to buy Greenland off of Denmark. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, told him, sorry, Greenland is not for sale. He then canceled his planned trip to Denmark. Of course, with this war, everything is taking a backseat when it comes to the foreign policy efforts of the Trump administration. But it's not only the U.S. Just a few days ago, on Friday, we've heard from the Indonesian Foreign Ministry that the D8, or the summit of the developing 8 Muslim majority countries that was supposed to take place in Jakarta next month, is also being postponed. Now, with this delay obviously happening, that's not to say that U.S. and China have completely, stopped talking or whatever. We've just seen those talks in Paris. That's where we got that Bessent quote. Anyway, following those two-day talks, Chinese Commerce Vice Minister Li Chenggang said that both sides agreed to continue to maintain the stability of tariffs, and they have discussed the possibility of establishing a new mechanism for bilateral investment. He said the sides, quote, conducted deep, frank, and constructive consultations. We've heard some more. Reuters cited sources reporting the talks were remarkably stable, which is an interesting way to put it. The AFP news agency reported that Beijing had accused Washington of erroneous claims that China tacitly condones forced labor. Now, the U.S. has officially launched an investigation into that forced labor thing. Last week, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said at the time the probe was discriminatory and nothing more than an attempt at trade manipulation. Now, just for some quick context, Washington had launched 2 separate investigations under the 301 section of the Trade Act. One is into forced labor and the other into excess industrial capacity. Now, these Section 301 probes could lead to new tariffs on major trading partners, including China. There's EU, Mexico, and so on. And these probes come after the U.S. Supreme Court shot down most of Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. He then imposed a blanket 10% tariff on all imports, which he then threatened to raise to 15%. But we're up to speed now with the tariffs.
I mean, strong but characteristically diplomatic language from China. How is Beijing likely to respond to any significant delay, do you think?
Well, they have been traditionally tight-lipped. We've heard from that gentleman from the foreign ministry that the timing and details and so on is being discussed, but he also said that, quote, diplomacy between heads of state plays an irreplaceable role in providing strategic guidance to China-U.S. relations. Now, we haven't heard much more than his remarks on Monday or Tuesday. However, the state-run China Daily published an editorial on Tuesday following those trade talks in Paris, describing them as constructive, but warned the U.S. president that Beijing's openness should not be mistaken for, quote, acquiescence.
Hard to know where we are, isn't it, with US-China relations at the moment when it comes to trade, when it comes to diplomacy more generally. Do you think this has impacted things at all?
Well, ahead of this summit, months prior, American officials have been saying that there is some sort of a plan for Donald Trump and Xi Jinping to meet as many as 4 times a year to, iron out any issues. This summit was also supposed to be an opportunity for the two leaders to talk on extending that tariff truce they reached in October, and that's a 1-year truce. So this might hurt that planned schedule, that momentum, if this summit does not take place or takes place even later than the Trump suggested 5 or 6 weeks. The two leaders have a number of issues to discuss. Of course, there are the U.S. weapons shipments to Taiwan. There are Chinese rare earths. There is the issue of U.S.'s closest neighbor, Canada, warming ties with China, looking outward past its traditional allies. And there's certainly quite a lot for them to discuss. Anyway, we'll have to just wait and see.
Andy, always great to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll be checking in with our correspondents around the world for the latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Afghanistan now, and a devastating airstrike in Kabul has left hundreds feared dead, marking a major escalation in regional tensions. Afghan officials are blaming neighbouring Pakistan for targeting a hospital, a claim Islamabad denies. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
A spokesman for the Afghan government says at least 400 people were killed and around 250 injured when an airstrike hit a drug rehabilitation hospital in the capital late Monday evening. Witnesses report hearing multiple explosions as patients and staff were finishing evening prayers, with bombs striking patient wards and other parts of the facility. Local media footage shows flames engulfing sections of a hospital complex, thick smoke rising into the night sky, and emergency teams carrying bodies away on stretchers. Authorities say the target site was a large state-run treatment center with up to 2,000 beds, and rescue operations are still ongoing as crews search for victims and try to contain the damage. Pakistan has rejected the allegation, calling them false and misleading, and insists its forces carried out precise strikes against what it describes as a militant infrastructure. The incident comes amid intensifying conflict between the two neighbors, which began last month and has already seen cross-border attacks and rising casualties on both sides. China has urged restraint, calling for a return to negotiations, while the United Nations has expressed concern over reports of civilian deaths. However, casualty figures remain unverified. and independent confirmation has not yet been possible as tensions continue to rise. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Hospitals in Kabul have been overwhelmed after this deadly airstrike as survivors recount the moment of impact and doctors work through the night to treat the wounded.
Rescue teams combed through the debris in Kabul on Tuesday as firefighters worked to extinguish remaining fires after an airstrike hit a drug rehabilitation hospital. Pakistan denied targeting the facility, saying the operation was aimed at military installations. Afghan Taliban officials said more than 400 people were killed and 250 injured, in an incident that underscores the intensifying tensions between the two countries. Hospitals across the capital were quickly overwhelmed as ambulances and private vehicles brought in the wounded throughout the night, putting severe pressure on already stretched medical services.
When the explosion occurred, we were informed through the Kabul Ambulance Dispatch Center that a massive blast had taken place in the area of the 1,000-bed addicts camp. We arrived here with all our staff, and the injured were being brought to us from all directions.
Medical teams worked continuously as operating theatres remained in use overnight and wards filled to capacity. Survivors described a sudden and disorienting attack that shattered what had been an ordinary evening.
We had finished praying Taraweeh and went outside. I saw that they bombed a place a short distance away from us. I went into a room, and a few moments later, our camp was bombed as well. After that, I don't know what happened. When I woke up, I found myself here.
I was in the kitchen cooking food for the patients when suddenly I heard the sound of an aircraft and the kitchen filled with fire. I rushed outside and saw that everything was on fire. The flames were coming from above.
At the site of the strike, the search for bodies continued into the next day as families and staff tried to account for those missing. The strike marks a further escalation in cross-border hostilities.
Okay, let's bring in Omar Samad now, former Afghanistan ambassador to Canada and France. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Prime Time. Devastating strike, hundreds feared dead. What's your assessment at this stage, and how credible are these casualty figures, do you think?
Well, my assessment, obviously, first of all, is one of deep sadness and dismay at what has happened. This should not have happened. This runs counter to everything that international law subscribes. If you look at the Geneva protocols and everything that is involved in conflict and the rights of civilians and how to protect civilians. But having said this, I think that it's also very disturbing to hear certain quarters, especially in Pakistan, not only deny the fact that this has happened, but also then to twist it and to lay blame on others for this devastation which took so many lives. Now, we don't know exactly how many people have perished during this holy month of Ramadan in this attack. Every eyewitness, whether they're journalists on the ground, whether they are ICRC, United Nations has verified this today through a statement. Everyone acknowledges that an attack took place, that a building was hit, that was a civilian hospital for drug rehabilitation, and that dozens or hundreds of people are either dead or injured seriously or both. So there is no doubt about this, and what we need to do now is focus on how to prevent and how to make those who are responsible accountable.
No doubt, of course, Ambassador, that it happened. No doubt the suffering that's been caused. We can see the awful scenes in our report there. But Islamabad is denying it was responsible. How do we interpret that conflicting narrative?
Well, I cannot speak for them. I do not know what evidence and what information they use, what data they used to, first of all, decide to attack. Crossing into Afghanistan, attacking the various sites over the past few weeks and months. This is not the first time. It has been recorded, it has been documented. The international community and the responsible agencies and institutions need to look into this very seriously. So Islamabad, of course, will do whatever it takes to shift blame and not take responsibility for what has happened. But this is not going to go away. This is left not only an imprint, psychological, emotional, and otherwise, and physical, but it's going to also impact relations down the road. I hope that this does not turn into a tit-for-tat, retaliatory sort of process between the two sides. But the Afghans also feel very aggrieved, and they feel like something needs to be done. So what diplomats and those who are responsible authorities in both countries need to do is to, first of all, agree to talk about a ceasefire, and then maybe whether mediated by a third party or United Nations or any other entity that is reliable and credible, then I think that would be a first step. But I don't, unfortunately, see that happening anytime soon.
And you mentioned international law a few moments ago. If it is proven that a civilian facility like this was deliberately targeted, what would that mean under international law?
Well, I think that the Geneva Protocols, rules and regulations that come out of the Rome protocols, all of those are very clear on what nation states and state responsibilities are toward civilians and civilian institutions and installations in warfare and conflict. I think that the competent authorities, whether belonging to an international entity or certain countries and judicial entities that can pursue such investigations, need to do so. An inquiry is needed, an investigation is needed, and we need to get the facts right, and we need to take action. I mean, these things happen quite often around the world in conflict. We hear about them all the time. Very seldom do they amount to any type of action, judicial action, and justice being rendered, unfortunately. But we cannot continue this way. As a diplomat, ex-diplomat, I can tell you that the international system as we know it, the rules-based order has to be respected. Otherwise, we are going to enter a very dark and unpredictable and uncontrollable situation around the world where anyone with impunity can do whatever they want. This is not the kind of world we should live in or leave behind for our children.
It's certainly a very dangerous moment, incredibly difficult to do when people are legitimately grieving such an awful situation. But how do you go about ensuring that escalation doesn't continue, that we don't descend into tit-for-tat atrocities?
Well, I think that given this particular situation, what just happened, there is a responsibility that rests on the institutions in Pakistan, on the population at large in Pakistan, on the politicians, those in or outside of government who have influence, to send a very clear message to their leaders who are in position of authority that this is not acceptable. And then the same with the Taliban or in Afghanistan, a country that's in isolation, a country that is not recognized by most of the world, a country that is isolated and is going through economic hardship, and millions of refugees have been pushed out of both Pakistan and Iran in the past 2-3 years. I think that there is also there needs to be a reckoning with reality, a reckoning with trying to resolve some of the issues that exist within Afghanistan, addressing some of the complaints, some of the restrictions that are imposed. I think that the Taliban also have a certain responsibility toward good governance. So both countries have to do more, but then hopefully impartial third-party mediators can step in with influence and with impartiality. They can hopefully offer some remedies, technical and otherwise, in order for us to reach a ceasefire that could then turn into more substantial diplomatic political talks.
Ambassador, it's been very good indeed speaking with you. Thank you for joining us on Prime Time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving to Central Asia now. Kazakhstan is taking a step forward toward entering the European green energy market. Lawmakers in Astana have ratified a strategic agreement with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan that could pave the way for a new trans-regional energy corridor linking Central Asia to Europe. Now, the project focuses on exporting renewable electricity through routes across the Caspian and Black Seas as demand for clean energy continues to grow.
Kazakhstan's Majlis has ratified the strategic partnership agreement with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan on green energy. The project could reshape the region's energy landscape and open a direct route to European markets. The deal was signed by the three countries' leaders in Baku in 2024 on the sidelines of COP29. It aims to link the energy systems of Central Asia and the South Caucasus into a single export network. The plan is to deliver renewable electricity from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan and then onto Europe. A key part of the project is a high-voltage subsea cable along the bottom of the Caspian Sea. It's technically complex, but officials say it's essential for direct access to the European Union's electricity market. The feasibility study is already backed by international partners. The Asian Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank have confirmed grant funding of around $2 million. The study itself is estimated at about €1 million. In Astana, officials say the project will strengthen export capacity and support technological development. Kazakhstan is also looking to position itself as a key energy hub in Eurasia as demand for clean energy grows in Europe looks to diversify its supplies. Pariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
At a Brussels meeting, EU foreign ministers say they will not get drawn into the escalating conflict with Iran. They stress protecting global energy supplies while avoiding a wider NATO confrontation. Our Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, as the Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels says it will not be drawn into the escalating war with Iran. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said ministers discussed the growing security risks posed by the closure of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, which carries a significant share of the world's oil shipments. They talked about reinforcing the EU's naval mission Operation Aspides, which protects commercial shipping across a wide area from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Oman. But Kallas revealed that member states did not want to expand the mission's mandate into the Strait of Hormuz, despite mounting pressure from Washington. Aspides was launched back in 2024 following attacks on merchant ships by Yemen's Houthi militants and currently focuses on safeguarding freedom of navigation and monitoring maritime threats in that region. Kallas also warned that the crisis could benefit Russia, noting that disruptions to global energy supplies and rising oil prices risk boosting Moscow's revenues and helping finance its war against Ukraine. The debate comes as U.S. President Donald Trump continues to express frustration with his allies. Last night, he said the problem with NATO is that the U.S. will, quote, always be there for them, but they'll never be there for us. Germany pointed out that the conflict with Iran is not a NATO matter and ruled out participation in a broader military campaign. Meantime, Kallas met with India's foreign minister in Brussels and stressed that the EU is growing closer to India as, quote, geopolitical uncertainty makes a clear case for deeper partnerships. Alongside the Middle East crisis, ministers reviewed developments in Moldova, where the EU is monitoring security concerns around the country's water supply linked to Russian strikes on Ukrainian hydropower. Overall, though, Brussels wants to make it very clear that while Europe shares the goal of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and protecting global energy supplies, the EU remains very wary of turning the Iran conflict into a wider NATO confrontation. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Well, thank you for watching Primetime. We're taking a break now for just a few weeks, and then, of course, we will be back with plenty more news and analysis from all of us here at A News. Thanks for watching.